Thomas, thanks a lot for this very interesting introduction. I think it will really help. A lot of the concepts will come back. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to show that many interesting images, but I think it will, it's nicely continue. What I want to talk about is the idea of practical shape grammar, and it's an idea in development. I'm not going to try to completely define it, but in my development of my software development of a generic or general shape grammar, it's a concept that I'm dealing with, trying to deal with, and I will demonstrate or illustrate it using a case study. I'm also focusing on Chinese lattice design grammars, and showing different alternative explications actually of the same rule or rules, and then conclude with some discussion on the implementation. So let me quickly make a connection to cultural DNA. I think for people who use or are interested in shape grammars, they are a way, a formalism that can capture cultural DNA of designs, and we have many examples since Chinese ice-ray lattice designs, and I left a few out as well of cultural types of buildings that can be encapsulated in a shape grammar and can be used to regenerate such designs. However, most of these examples really are analytical grammars, which means that they have very limited practical value. And the idea exactly of grammar capturing cultural DNA could be that we could use this in our current designs to bring in some of these cultural notions that are embodied in it into today's designs. But with these examples mostly, that would be very complicated, because that's not what they're designed for. And that's really what I'm trying to assess this, what would constitute a practical shape grammar. And as I said, I'm going to only present a reasonable assumption. I think there could be many more things said about what it means to be practical, but for this presentation, I'm dealing with just two measures. One is the number of construction elements in a rule, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I exactly mean with that. And the second one is the number of potential matches that the rule matching algorithm may have to consider. So construction elements, they're basically elements that serve to constrain rule application. Like Thomas showed the line that makes sure that it's not symmetrical anymore, or labels that are attached to it. And they of course are then contained in the left-hand side of the rule, because that's the condition, is what constrains the rule application. And so as a measure, this is what I basically came up with, is that you would calculate the number of elements that do not form part of any shape in the language produced by the shape grammar. Any elements that never appear in any of the results could be considered as construction elements. It's a little bit of a complicated definition, because you would basically have to consider all the results of the language, generate them all before you can even tell what the construction elements are. So we could work with a simplification. It's an upper bound. It's the number of elements that are not part of a specific shape in the language. Now, of course, everything then depends on what kind of specific shape you're going to use, etc. But in the example that I'll show, it will be useful enough to define them. It's not the same as the number of non-terminal elements. I mean, when we, in the standard shape grammar definition, non-terminals tend to be points with labels, but as Thomas already showed, you could draw a line in it. That line itself is not considered a non-terminal, but it actually has the exact same idea as the construction element. And so the idea, of course, would be to reduce this kind of construction element in the practical shape grammar. And then about the potential matches, well, we of course want to reduce, we want to make the algorithm efficient. We don't want it to have to spend too much time on matches that are actually not really possible. And in the worst case example, if we're dealing with finding a triangle within a set of n line segments, it's a combinatorics problem. It's actually of the order of n cubed. Kind of number of combinations that we have to look at of 3 line segments. And if we can reduce that, then we could get a more efficient. And reducing that, of course, is exactly why we bring in construction elements, or why we bring in non-terminal elements. So they are kind of like in opposition to each other. You can add a lot of construction elements, and then you will have only exactly those potential matches that you're interested in, but then that might also not be what you want. So the idea here is can we find some kind of balance? And of course, it's all about relativity. It's not about absolute. In fact, construction elements, there's nothing wrong with it. We use it all the time, even in drawings, not only in shape grammars. It's about finding a proper match and comparing 2 different versions of the same rule, where one may have more or less of one or the other. And so as a case study, I'll look at the generation of Chinese axial lattice designs as Steiny presented it in his paper in 1977. Basically, it's quite simple. These 4 basic rules. You have a triangle and you split it up in a quadrilateral and a triangle, or you have a quadrilateral and you split it up in a pentagon and a triangle, or you have a quadrilateral and you split it up in 2 quadrilaterals, and then the pentagon case. And then you start with an initial shape, you apply one of these rules, and then each polygon that derives from that, you can apply again one of these rules, and then you can further subdivide until it is an appropriate or an interesting design results from this generation. And so these rules are very nicely drawn, but they are not, you can't even implement them like that. First of all, it's a parametric shape grammar. Nothing indicates that these rules are parametric. Also, there are absolutely no constraints in this. So you could reapply the same rule to one of the previous polygons, which may be interesting, as Thomas showed, but in this particular case, that's not the purpose. So, but Steiny dealt with that. He explicated his parametric shape rules quite nicely. He added, so first of all, he added these coordinates. So one point can be 0, 0, and then the other point can be have a variable x and a 0, y, and then the third point will have a variable x and a variable y. And he adds one construction element, a point, which is the center of gravity of the triangle, or just about it. And if we actually, so it scores really well on the number of construction elements. When we look at the potential matches, so you have to, basically, the matches, you could use a point, and it could use one of the lines that would be enough to determine whether you have the appropriate, whether you find the appropriate triangle. And so it's basically the number of potential matches is equal to the number of line segments. So per polygon it would be in the order of n squared, but no longer in the order of n cubed. So it's definitely an improvement. There is then later on, Mark Tapia in '92 implemented, he created a shape grammar interpreter, and then he explored again the isolattice grammar, but he used a different explication in which he uses 3 labeled points that are also connected with line segments. So these the labels aren't shown in here. The triangle is actually scaled to half the size within it, and as a result, we can now do matches on the 3 points. They have labels, so we find if we're looking for, they should be parametric labels, of course. Then if we're looking for a particular label, we find in this case 3 points, and so we only have 1 potential match per polygon. So in total it becomes n order of n in the number of polygons that we're interested in applying to. And so this is a very good result. But the sad thing is that we have all these construction elements which during the generation, the derivation of our designs, it will kind of like overcrowd the design, and Mark in his derivation, he can then hide these things, and of course we can hide it, but then once you hide it, it becomes a problem that, how do you now, yes, you can do the derivation, but if you're really trying to design with it and you want to modify the rules and you don't see part of it, then it becomes also quite complicated. So here's an alternative using labeled line segments. So basically the idea here is that we just work with the original polygon, and rather than adding any points, we just add labels to the line segments. They should be parametric labels, so they could be descriptions. Steiny's notion of descriptions, of course, is much broader than parametric labels, but you could easily represent parametric labels with it as well. And in this case, of course, you have to do the match on the lines and the distinguishable intersection points. But because the lines are labeled, you can group only those lines that have the same label. And so you, again, have just one or a constant, depending on whether it's a triangle or a quadrilateral or something, but a constant number of matches per polygon. So order of the number of polygons, and the number of construction elements is also fairly limited. So this could be a interesting kind of like solution to balance in between them. So the part to identify here is it goes beyond traditional shape grammars that you tend to use line segments and labeled points, and it says, well, you can find a better solution, but you have to then consider the possibility to label line segments rather than only labeled points. And so then I thought, well, what would happen if we use labeled plane segments? Could we go even one step further? But actually we can't, because although you can label the plane segment, if you have a rule that only has a plane segment, then under emergence, any part of that plane segment will also be a plane segment. And so you still require the boundary segments. And because you need to know which boundary segments belong to which polygon, you would still have to label them. So it doesn't really add anything. So going from points to line segments in this case really works. Going from line segments to plane segments wouldn't work, unless we, of course, are dealing in 3 dimensions then it might be a different equation, let's say. So in terms of implementation, well, Thomas already mentioned some of this work, but since it's a parametric shape grammar, any of the graph-based shape grammar implementations or approaches could be used to develop this. Or an alternative is what Rob so nicely shared with us last year as the handout of his paper, the shape schema grammar, which just as a recap uses real schema, point schema, line segments, and shape schema schemata, where you can always have constraints on the coordinate values, on the relating the coordinates, relating the endpoints, or relating the shape elements. And in order to, for example, do the labeled line segments, this would then need to be extended into maybe something called an augmented shape schema grammar, where you can also have a description schema schemata that you can then attach or assign to line schemata or shape schemata. And in conclusion, maybe trying to get back as to why I'm interested in this, and I've been looking at it. I think, well, first, let's say practicality is I think is a useful measure. We could, in this way, understand that Steiny's explication, on the one hand, uses very few construction elements, but it's not very efficient. The way Tapia's explication is very efficient, but it's at the cost of many more construction elements. And we could find alternative explications where both objectives can be addressed. But really, why I'm doing this is because I'm developing a general shape grammar interpreter, and I'm trying to understand that in order to address these kinds of issues, you have to think beyond what is currently might be existing in terms of implementations. So it should allow not only for labeled line segments, but also for descriptions, also for parametric shapes, or maybe shape schemata, etc. So the important conclusion for me to myself is that this general shape grammar interpreter needs to allow for a lot of flexibility in the types of data that you incorporate, whether it's geometric or non-geometric, whether it's 2D or 3D, whether it's parametric or non-parametric. And at this moment, I mean, it's of course an ongoing project. We've finished most of the spatial elements, rectilinear spatial elements in both 2D and 3D with various types of attributes, including labels, weights, what I would call enumerative attributes, or what Terry referred to as color grammars. And the descriptions are on the way, and yeah, there's still a lot of work. I don't know how far we will get within the project, but it's if you're already interested in some of the initial results, there's some demonstrations on the website of sortal.org, and I'd be always happy to have one-on-one discussions about with anybody who might be willing to use it. Thank you.